The man on the floor of the freight office was dying, and the four people standing over him had already decided to let him. Mara Quinn saw that much in the first second through the open door, the way they stood back from him, the way a man stands back from something he has already counted as lost. He was sprawled against the grain sacks with a fever sheen on his face, and a dark wet stain spreading slow through the bandage on his side, and his breath came in a wet rattle she knew too well. The freight agent had a hand on his own chin, thinking about the cost of a burial. Outside, the Kansas wind drove grit against the window in long, hissing sheets. Mara set down the carpetbag that held everything she owned in the world and crossed the room and knelt in the dirt beside the dying cowboy, because no one else was going to. Before this goes any further, if you believe that a person the whole world has thrown away can be the one who saves a life, then subscribe to this channel and stay with me to the very end. Drop the name of your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels tonight. Every name, every city, it means more to me than you know. Now stay close, because the woman kneeling on that freight office floor had been rejected by the man she crossed half a country to marry not 2 hours before. And what she did in the next 10 days would leave the whole of Coldwater County unable to look her in the eye. The year was 1887, and the town was Coldwater, in the dry plains country of western Kansas, where the wind never fully stopped, and a person learned to live with it the way you live with a sound in your own house. Mara Quinn had come to Coldwater to be married. She had a letter folded in her bag that said so, 11 letters in fact, written over the better part of a year, each one warmer than the last, signed by a man named Royce Tilden, who farmed wheat on the east edge of the county, and had told her in his own hand that he did not care a thing about a woman's size, that he wanted a wife with strong hands and a steady heart, and that he believed he had found her. He had met her coach at the depot that morning. She had watched his face as she stepped down. She had seen, in the space of a single breath, every word and every letter turn to ash. She was a large woman. She had always been a large woman, broad and tall and heavy through the arms. And she had told him so plainly in her second letter, because she had learned long ago not to let a man find it out in person. He had written back that it did not matter. Standing on the depot platform with the whole town watching, it had mattered to Royce Tilden very much. He had not even had the decency to say it quietly. "There's been a mistake," he'd said, loud enough for the loafers on the depot bench. "I can't. No, I was misled." And he had turned and walked to his wagon and driven off east, and left her standing on the platform with her bag, and her folded letters and the laughter starting up behind her, low at first, and then not low at all. She had learned a long time ago that stopping only gave them the satisfaction of watching it land. So she had not stopped. She had picked up her bag with both hands and walked off the platform with her chin level, and she had been walking still, with no notion of where, looking only for some office that might know when the next eastbound coach could carry her away from this place, when she had passed the open door of the freight office and seen the man dying on the floor. "Stand back," she said now, to the four of them, and something in her voice moved them back. She put her hand to the cowboy's forehead, and it was like touching a stove. She pulled the edge of the bandage and looked underneath, and did not let her face show what she saw, which was a bullet wound a week old and gone wrong, the flesh around it hot and tight and streaked with red lines reaching like roots toward his heart. "Who is he?" she asked. "Wade Ackerman," the freight agent said. "Got himself shot running off rustlers on his own range, fool thing. 2 men against 6. Drove himself to town 3 days back for the doctor, and the doctor's in Dodge till Thursday." He shrugged, and the shrug said the rest. "He's got a place west of here. No people, no wife, no kin anybody knows. We figured to keep him comfortable." Comfortable. She had heard that word before, over other beds. It was the word men used when they had stopped trying. "He's not going to die on a freight office floor," Mara said. "Whose wagon is outside?" No one answered, which she took for permission. She had nursed her mother through 2 years of dying and half the sick of a Missouri River town besides, and she knew the difference between a wound that has turned and a wound that has turned too far. And this one had not gone too far. Not quite. Not yet. But it would by morning if it sat here being kept comfortable. She got him into the freight agent's wagon herself, mostly, taking the weight of him across her shoulders, the way she had carried grain and firewood and her own grief her whole life. And if any of the 4 men standing about found the sight of a large rejected bride hauling a dying cowboy into a wagon to be a comical thing, none of them quite dared to laugh. She climbed up, took the reins, and asked the way to Wade Ackerman's place. The freight agent told her, and then said in the voice of a man easing his own conscience, that she was a fool for trying. She told him she had been called worse things that very morning by better-dressed men, and slapped the reins. The Ackerman place, when she reached it near dark, was a small sound house gone shabby at the edges, not from laziness, she could see, but from a man living alone and running hard, and letting the surfaces of things go because there was no one to keep them for. A good barn, a clean well, a single chair by a cold stove, the look of a man who worked from dark to dark and came home only to sleep. She did not sleep that first night. She built the fire up and boiled every cloth in the house, and cleaned the wound the way her mother had taught her, opening it, draining it, packing it with a poultice of bread and milk and powdered charcoal that her grandmother had sworn by and that Mara had seen pull the poison out of worse. She got water into him a spoon at a time through cracked lips, and willow bark tea when he could take it for the fever. She talked to him through the worst of it, low and steady, not because she thought he heard, but because a voice in the dark is a rope a person can follow back. Near dawn the fever broke its first sweat and his breathing changed, and she let herself sit down in the single chair for the first time in 18 hours. And she did not cry, because she had a private rule against it, and she broke the rule for exactly the length of time it took the sun to clear the east ridge, and then she got up and started again. He surfaced on the third day. She was changing the poultice when his eyes came open, gray, fever-bright, trying to make sense of a large, strange woman bent over his ruined side in his own house. "You're not the doctor," he said. His voice was gravel dragged over gravel. "Doctor's in Dodge till Thursday. You'd have been in the ground by Thursday." She did not look up from her work. "Lie still or you'll tear it open and waste a day's progress." "Who are you?" "Mara Quinn. I was passing." Which was true enough, and the rest of it was nobody's business. "When did you last eat?" He thought about it. "Don't rightly know. Can you keep down broth, or are you going to bring it back up and waste my labor?" A long pause, then, with the ghost of something that on a healthier face might have been humor. "Broth. Broth's good." She had a pot of it going already, made from a hen she'd found him owning, and a wild onion and a fist of barley, and what little else she'd had in her bag, and she'd not meant to think much of it. But the smell had been building in that empty little house all afternoon. Onion gone soft and sweet, the fat rising gold, the marrow giving up its richness into the water. The first proper cooking smell those walls had held in a long while, she'd wager. She had watched it reach him even before he woke. She'd seen his nose work in his sleep, seen something in his ruined face ease, the way a body remembers good things before the mind has caught up to them. She brought it to him now in a tin cup and held the back of his head up with one broad hand and fed it to him slow, a sip and a wait and a sip, watching the warmth of it go down into him and spread. He had the look of a man who had forgotten that being cared for was a thing that happened to people, and then, somewhere in the third or fourth swallow, the look of a man remembering. His eyes filled briefly, and he turned his face a little toward the wall, and she pretended not to see it, because some things a person is owed in private. He drank the whole cup and asked, rough and almost shy, whether there was more. There she gave him that too. Then he slept, real sleep, not the gray drowning kind, and when she touched his forehead in the night it was only warm now, not burning, and she stood over him a moment in the dark and let herself believe he would live. She mended his fences while he healed. There was no sense sitting idle, and a sagging fence offended her, and the cattle he had left were scattered through 3 sections with no one to mind them. She drove them in, alone on a borrowed horse that did not care for her and learned to, working from gray light to dark, and coming back each evening with her hands torn and her temper intact. She fixed the barn door that hung tired on its hinge, and the loose board on the porch step, and the pump that had taken to spitting air. She found a milk cow gone near dry from want of milking, and sat with her morning and evening and coaxed the milk back, and within a week there was butter again in a house that had forgotten the taste of it. She found, too, that the man owned good land and poor habits. Seed left in a damp bin, harness left to crack for want of grease, and she set the small things right, one by one, not out of any wish to be thanked, but because a thing left undone in front of her was a thing she could not seem to leave alone. She did all of it without announcing any of it, the way she had always done what needed doing, and when Wade Ackerman, propped in his bed by the window, watched a woman the whole county had laughed at that week set his ruined place to rights with her bare hands, He did not say much, but he watched, and the watching changed somewhere in those days from the wary watching of a sick man toward a stranger into something he did not have a name for and did not try to give one. On the fifth day, he tried to thank her, and she cut him off. "You can thank me by not dying," she said. "I've put a deal of work into you. It'd be poor manners to waste it." "That fellow at the depot," Wade said, watching her, "the one who left you standing. Word came out with the boy who brought the mail. He let it sit. He's a fool." Mara kept her hands moving on the poultice. "He's a man who could read his own letters but couldn't read his own heart. Common enough." She tied off the bandage. "I don't need defending, Mr. Ackerman. I stopped needing it about 10 years before you got shot." "No," he said slowly, "I don't expect you do." He communicated the rest in the way of a man who had run out of easy words a long time ago. When she came in cold from the fences, he had, somehow, gotten himself up to bank the stove against her return. When she lifted a sack of meal she'd hauled from the wagon, he was there beside it before she could, taking the worst of the weight onto his good side, saying nothing about it. One evening she found her single carpet bag, which had sat by the door all week, packed ready, the bag of a woman who did not let herself unpack, moved to a clean shelf in the corner of the main room, with a folded quilt set beside it. He never mentioned it. She never mentioned it. But she understood that a man who lived alone and let his surfaces go had cleared a shelf for her, and that this was a kind of speech. The thing that nearly took it all came on the 10th day, and it came wearing a clean collar. Royce Tilden drove out from the east end of the county in his good wagon, and with him came the rustler's employer, for that was the part Mara had not known, the part the whole tangle turned on. The men who had shot Wade Ackerman had been clearing his range for a land speculator named Holloway who wanted the Ackerman water rights, and had decided the simplest way to a dead man's land was to make the man dead. Holloway had ridden to town the morning Mara arrived to file a claim that Wade Ackerman, having no kin and being plainly about to die, had let his place go to ruin and forfeited his rights to it. He had brought witnesses. He had brought Royce Tilden, who was glad of any errand that took him near the woman he had wronged, so he might tell himself she'd landed fine. They had not expected to find Wade Ackerman on his feet. He was on them, just barely, pale, leaning hard on the doorframe, his side strapped tight, but standing in his own doorway in front of his own house, with the fences mended behind him and smoke rising honest from his chimney and a milk cow lowing in the lot. Holloway's whole case had rested on a dead man and a ruined ranch, and here was a living man and a ranch in better order than the day he'd been shot. "You're meant to be dead," Holloway said, and the saying of it told the whole room more than he meant it to. "I expect you're disappointed," Wade said. And then it was Royce Tilden, of all people, who undid them. Royce, who could not keep a thing behind his teeth, who looked from Wade to Mara standing in the doorway behind him, and felt the old humiliation curdle into something mean. "You," he said to her. "Of course it'd be you. Holloway, this is the woman I told you of, the mail order they sent me, the one I sent packing. She's no nurse. She's a—" and he reached for the cruelest word he had. He did not get to finish it. "Say the rest of that," Wade Ackerman said very quietly, "and I'll come off this door frame to make you, and I've got the strength for one good hit left in me, and I'll spend it on you and call it the best trade of my life." The yard went still. Wade did not waste words. He had run out of the easy ones years back and never missed them. He used the hard ones now plainly, and they landed all the harder for being few. "This woman pulled me back from the grave with her own 2 hands while every soul in your town kept me comfortable and waited for me to die. She mended my fences and minded my stock and asked nothing. You." He looked at Holloway, "shot me for my water and came to rob a grave you thought you'd already filled. And you," he looked at Royce, and something in his face made Royce step back, "rode half a county to insult the best woman either of us will ever stand near because you were too small to know what you'd thrown away. The doctor's in town now. He set me. He saw the wound. He'll tell the county exactly how old that bullet is and exactly who was clearing my range the day it went in. Now get off my land, all of you, while the one good hit is still just a promise." They got off his land. The county learned the rest within the week, the way a county does. The doctor, back from Dodge, confirmed the bullet's age and the deliberate ruin of it. Holloway's hired men, faced with a hanging, gave him up to save their own necks, and Holloway found that a land speculator with no land and a charge of attempted murder is a poorly thought of mandate. He left Coldwater between 2 days and did not come back, and Royce Tilden discovered that a town will laugh at a jilted bride right up. until it learns she saved a man's life single-handed, and then it turns, all at once, and finds it was the jilter who'd been the fool all along. And there is no harder place to live than a small town that has decided you are small. But the part the county could not get past, the part that was told in kitchens and over fences for years after, was the sight of it the following Sunday. Wade Ackerman, who had not been seen in the Coldwater Church in living memory, walked in on his own feet with Mara Quinn on his arm before the whole assembled town that had kept him comfortable and waited for him to die, and before the very benches that had laughed her off the depot platform 10 days before. He did not make a speech. He had never made one in his life. "Most of you," he said to the room, "had me dead and buried in your heads a week ago. This woman didn't. You laughed her off the train and went home to your suppers, and she carried me out of a freight office on her own back and kept me breathing for 10 days without sleeping right one of them." He looked around at the silent benches. "I came to say 2 things. The first is that I'm alive, and you can all stop pricing my land. The second is that I've asked Mara Quinn to marry me, and she said yes. And if there's anyone here who looked at her sideways the day she came to this county, you might want to think hard on the fact that she's the only person in it who didn't leave a man to die." He set his hat back on. "That's all. Reverend, I believe you can start." There was no laughter in the Coldwater Church that morning. There was, after a long moment, something none of them had expected to feel, which was shame, and under the shame the beginnings of respect, which is the only thing shame is good for. They were married 3 weeks on, when Wade could stand a full hour without leaning. Mara Quinn wore no veil and made no apology and walked up the aisle on her own steady legs, taking up every inch of room a woman of her size takes up, and for the first time in her life she did not feel the wrongness of it. She had crossed half a country to be told she was too much. She had ended it standing beside a man who had counted every ounce of her and found her exactly the right amount. The ranch grew after that the way a place grows when 2 people have decided to stay. The fences stood straight. The water Holloway had killed for ran clean and unclaimed through Ackerman land for 40 more years. They never did get rich, but they got enough, and the smell of cooking never left that little house again. And Wade Ackerman lived to be an old man with a stiffness in one side that he said kept him honest about how he'd gotten it. In the spring of 1916, their granddaughter was married under the elm that Mara had planted by the well her first year there, and the old woman who sat at the head of the gathering, broad still, white-haired now, her hands gone soft at last after a life of hard use, was asked by the bride, in the foolish, hopeful way of young women, whether she had ever been frightened that first year, alone and rejected in a strange county, with a dying man on her hands and the whole town against her. Mara Ackerman thought about it for a while. "No," she said at last. "I'd already been told the worst thing they had to tell me, that very first morning on the depot platform. After a person's heard the worst the world's got and gone right on standing child, there's not a great deal left to be frightened of." She looked out over the wheat, gold, and moving in the Kansas wind that had never once stopped. "I never was too much. That was always their poor arithmetic, not mine. I was exactly enough, every inch, and I stopped asking the world's leave to be it the day I knelt down on that freight office floor. You'd do well to learn it sooner than I did." And she had. From that floor on, she never once asked the world's permission to take up the room it took to be exactly who she was, and the world, having watched her save a man it had given up on, never again quite dared to suggest she shouldn't.